morning, good morning. How's everybody doing this morning? Good? How many of you did not eat breakfast? Liar. How many of you did not eat breakfast? No, you had breakfast here. That counts. Okay. There's breakfast back there. If you didn't get any, go get some. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day, unless it's full of sugar, then it's not that important. As long as there's some protein in there, it's important.
Disclaimer, there is eggs for protein, but there is lots of sugar.
Lots of sugar. Lots of sugar. Really loud this morning. That way everybody can stay awake, okay? I'll just be really loud. All right, turn in your Bibles. If you got a Bible, how many of you got a Bible this morning? All right, turn in your Bibles to Genesis chapter 37. Genesis 37. No verse. Genesis 37. We're going to start with verse 3. There's a lot of verses, so I'm not going to give them all to you because there's several chapters that we have to go over this morning. But I'll give you a couple verses, and then I'll give you the backstory of what we're looking at this morning. Okay. Verse number 3, we're going to start there. Now, how many of you have heard of this guy in the Bible, Joseph? Most of you? All of you? Okay. All right, we're going to look at Joseph at a different angle, not just something that applies to teenagers, although the majority of what we see in Joseph's life is when he was a teenager, but it also applies to adulthood as well. So we're going to look at it from that angle as well. Genesis chapter 37, verse number 3. Now, Joseph's father, Jacob, who knows the other name of Jacob? Jacob had two names. Israel, okay. So the whole country of Israel, the country that exists today, was named after this guy. It was named after Joseph's father. So you've got Jacob, his other name was Israel, known as Israel, and he had 12 sons. And his 12 sons are what all the 12 tribes of Israel are named after. So this is the foundational family for the country of Israel, okay? So look in verse number 3, Genesis chapter 37, verse number 3. And it says, now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children. So out of all the sons that he had, Joseph, he wasn't his oldest, but he was his favorite. How many of you think that your parents have a favorite? Okay, how many of you think that your favorite is you? Okay, all right, that's good. All right, that's good, that's good. Yeah, but well, even like usually the youngest is the favorite. Close to That's not the case in our family. Fair enough. Sometimes it's the oldest, okay? All right. I'm the second oldest, and I was always the favorite, so it just varies. But in this case, Joseph was the second to youngest. So he had 10 brothers older than him. And then comes Joseph, and now dad has a favorite. All right? So verse 3, now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. All right, so is any of this Joseph's fault? No. Is it his fault that he is his dad's favorite? No, his dad just decided he's my favorite. Is it his fault that his brothers hate him?
No.
No. Thank you. All right, it's not his fault that his brothers hate him. I'd rather have loud participation than none at all, okay? Don't act like old people, all right? We get in the auditorium and ask them questions, they'll, because the weight of the world is on their shoulders. Don't be that way, all right? Even when you become old, don't be that way. It's boring, it's not helpful, nobody likes it. But you don't like it, so don't forget. When people become adults, they forget what it's like to be a teenager. So right now, I'm telling you what it's like to be an adult, so don't forget, okay? When you get to be an adult, you get stressed out, and you get really boring, and you don't participate in stuff, so don't be that way, okay? All right, so anyway, so what we see in Joseph's life here, now, there's a lot of verses that we could look at in chapter 37. We would skip 38, because 38 talks about one of his brothers, doesn't have anything to do with him. But in chapter 39 and chapter 40 as well, there's a lot to look at. But instead of taking all the time to look at that this morning, I'm just going to tell you the story of what happened. And if you want to see for yourself what happened in this teenage boy's life, later on, read chapter 37, chapter 39, and chapter 40. Like it would take you 15 minutes. It's not that long. Well, read those 3 chapters and you'll see what happened in his life. But here's the story. He was the second to youngest in his family. He had 10 brothers older than him, 12 brothers total. His brothers hated him because he was his dad's favorite. All right? What we would see later on in this chapter is that later on, his 10 brothers are out in a field. Now, the way these guys did it, they didn't have like their 100-acre ranch and everything was fenced in and they had all their cattle and everything in one central location. They were spread out to different fields and they would move them to different fields wherever the grass was greener. And so sometimes they might have their house here, but their 5,000 sheep are 5 miles away. They didn't have cars back then, so they'd camp overnight. They wouldn't come home every night. The shepherds would take shifts. And so Joseph's 10 brothers are out away from the house with a bunch of the herd, and his dad sends him out there to take food to the brothers and find out how everything's going. Now, before this happens, you see later on in chapter 37, Joseph starts getting some dreams from God. Okay, now, because we have the whole Word of God, we don't have a bunch of people having dreams that we need to take seriously today. All kinds of wild people come up with like, I had a dream and it means this. It's like, it didn't mean anything. It means that you ate Taco Bell too late at night. And, you know, have you ever watched a movie late at night and then all of a sudden you have a dream that somehow relates to that movie? Okay, so what you think about right before you go to bed, and I promise you, what you eat right before you go to bed, have a lot to do with what you drink. So sometimes you have people these days, and even, especially in churches, and they're like, I had this dream, and God spoke to me in this dream. It's like, look, if God doesn't speak to you through the Word, then He's not speaking to you through a dream. Remember that, because not all of you will go to a Baptist church your whole life. Some of you, like in my early 20s, I quit going to a Baptist church and started trying to see what else was out there. There's some wild stuff in these churches out there. People get really weird out there. So what you need to know is we don't have dreams like Joseph had today. The way Joseph had dreams back then, he didn't have the Bible. God had to speak to them differently. So because God speaks to us through His Word now, because of that, what we now have, if we want to know God's will for our life, we can look in His Word. But Joseph had to see some dreams from God. And he told his brothers what these dreams were. And he told his father what these dreams were. His dream was that he would be ruling over the world somehow. Now, how many of you boys have ever dreamed that in one way, shape, or form? No? You've never dreamed of ruling over the world? Picture yourself at the top floor of a giant tower downtown running the company or whatever you're doing, you know. You're the king of the sport that you want to be in. You own it, whatever. Most people, even girls, most of us think that way sometimes, picturing yourself on top of whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish in your life. Joseph wasn't trying to gain anything for himself. It was God telling him what his future was going to be. And he told his brothers and he told his dad, and they all laughed at him and made fun of him for it. And then, so he's going to the field to talk to his brothers, and his brothers decide, we hate our younger brother so much, they grabbed him, they beat him up, they threw him in a pit that he couldn't get out of, and then they sold him, literally sold him, like into slavery for money to some people that were passing by going to Egypt. So imagine, have you ever been mad at your sibling? Right? Have you ever been mad at your sibling enough to beat him up, throw him in a pit, and sell him into slavery? Probably not. Okay? But that's how much these brothers, you guys are like, yeah, I would. Who's buying? But at the end of the day, these guys really hated their brother. They were evil. And so here's Joseph. He didn't do anything wrong. It's not his fault that he was his dad's favorite. It's not his fault that his brothers hated him. It's not his fault that he had these dreams. It's not his fault that they didn't like these dreams. It's not his fault that he was assaulted by his own family and sold into slavery. Then he goes into Egypt, and instead of complaining and griping about his situation, he continues to be faithful to God. He continues to serve God faithfully, even though he's got a bunch of bad stuff in his life that he didn't deserve. And then while he's serving God faithfully, again, he gets accused wrongfully by a woman and gets thrown into prison. So he goes from being his dad's favorite, hated by his brothers, sold into slavery, living as a slave, now thrown into prison. And prison back then isn't like prison now. Prison in Egypt, 5,000 years ago was not like prison is now. I can promise you. It's the worst kind of situation that you could be in. He's in prison for 2 years. And then some guys that worked for Pharaoh, who was the greatest ruler in all of the world at this time, They get thrown into prison. Joseph has some dreams about them and tells them what the dreams mean, and they have some dreams, and Joseph tells them what the dreams mean. And then they promise Joseph, when we get out, we're going to talk to Pharaoh about you so he can get you out of prison. They get out and they forget all about Joseph. Joseph spends another 2 years in prison. This whole entire time, he's staying faithful to God. He's being the young man that he's supposed to be. He's still walking and talking and acting accordingly. He's not complaining. He's not saying, why did this happen to me? Poor me. I hate my family. I'll get revenge. I hate Potiphar's wife. I'll get revenge. I hate these people. I'll get revenge. He's not thinking about any of that. He's just being faithful. Now, I'd like to show you these verses, but we don't have time to look at it all right now. Because you're going to have to ask the question for each and every one of us, and that's why I said it's not just for teenagers, it's also for adults. How many of us are faithful even when our life is going well? We're not faithful even when things are going well. And we look at Joseph's life, and this dude did not miss. Every single day, he walked the way he was supposed to walk. Every single day, he acted the way he was supposed to act. Every single day, he talked the way he was supposed to talk. And it started here. Because if he had bitterness towards his brothers, don't you think that would come out verbally? Don't you think he'd talk about it? If he was always questioning God, don't you think he'd be complaining? We'd see that. So because he kept his heart right, his outward actions stayed right. Because he kept his mind right, his conversation stayed right. So there's a couple things we're going to look at that I think apply to your life, because I think they've applied to my life when I was a teenager. They apply to basically everybody's life. If you're living any kind of a life worthwhile, then these three things will apply. These three things that I saw from Joseph's life. The first thing is, be confident in your God-given identity. What do I mean by that? Here's what I mean by that. God made you, right? Do you believe in God, or you just think there might be a God? That's a real question that you have to ask yourself. Do I really believe that God exists? And everybody in the room just said, yeah, I believe God exists, right? In your own mind, I know you said that. But maybe you actually don't. Because if you believed that God actually existed, you would act like it. Right? If I believe that there's a God that said, let there be light, and the sun outside, that light that we see is from the sun that gives us heat and light. And God literally said, let there be light, and the sun appeared. Do we really believe that? That this powerful God exists and watches us and made us? Because if we did, we would act like it. And so if we believe that there is a God, then really it only makes sense that only God can give us our purpose, right? If there really is a God and God created me, then would it make sense that I can dictate my own purpose? No. He made me for a purpose, right? So I have a choice to believe God's purpose for my life or design my own purpose. Now, if I don't believe that there's a God, then it's real easy for me to say, this is who I am, this is what I'm about, this is what I'm going to accomplish in my life. If I don't believe there's a God, then I am my own authority. But if I truly believe that there is a God in heaven, then I have to figure out why he made me, since he's the one that made me. Have you ever made anything before? You drew something, you built something, you did something. You made something happen, right? You built something. As adults, it's about building a business or whatever, you build a family, build a home, whatever it is that you built a life. Teenagers, maybe, it's a little different. But have you ever made something, built something, drawn something? You built something, right? Before you ever start something, you're like, nope, never. Right? Maybe in a video game, Minecraft, something. You built something, okay? Before you built something, or created something, or made something, you had a reason for it in your mind. Maybe it was just for fun, but you had a reason, right? Your reason was, I want to do this. I want to build this. I want to make this. Maybe there was a greater purpose for it. Maybe it was just because you felt like it. But you did that because you wanted to, and you were the one that decided the purpose behind what you were making. So if God made you, did he have a purpose for making you? Yeah. If God made you, does he get to decide what your purpose is? Now that's something that you have to let him decide. So here's Joseph. He was getting these dreams, and God was telling him, your purpose is to lead people, and by leading people, you'll be able to save the entire world. We see that later on when he sits on one of the thrones of Egypt. He does save the entire world from starvation. Literally. Millions and millions of people's lives are saved because the dreams that he had when he was a teenager came true. But Joseph always believed in God's identity for him and not what everybody else told him his identity was. He went to his father. He went to his own family. He went to people and said, this is what God made me for, and everybody laughed at him. Some people, he told them, this is what God made me for, and some people hated him for it. You know, you've got a purpose and an identity that God made you for, and there will be people that hate you for it. There will be people in your life that hate you because you're living God's purpose on your life. The older you get, the more enemies you'll have, especially if you live by what is right. If you live by that code, by truth, by what's right, you'll have plenty of enemies in your life. Everybody who's not going in the same direction as you will hate you for it. You think that just as teenagers, peer pressure bothers you. It never stops bothering you. You get to be an adult and peer pressure still bothers you. For some, it's worse in adulthood because you get peer pressure from your family, peer pressure from your church, peer pressure from the internet, peer pressure at work. You get peer pressure everywhere you go. And if you give in now as a teenager, you'll give in as an adult to peer pressure. Your identity and purpose must come from who God made you to be and who God said you are, and not who everybody else thinks you need to be, and not who everybody else thinks what you need to do in life. It needs to come from God. You know, one reason why Joseph never wavered in what God said for him to be is because he always believed God for it. He never doubted God's purpose on his life. He never said, well, I understand, God, what you want, but my parents want something different. God, I understand what you're telling me to do in my life, but the crowd, everybody else, my friends and my brothers and everybody else wants me to be something different. It doesn't matter what everybody else wants. What matters is what God wants. What did God make you for? What did God make you to be? Who did God make you to be? No, God didn't make you to be like everybody else. God made you to be different. I know you don't want to be different, but God made you to be different. And being different is not what you wear. Like, I'm going to wear something crazy or whatever so I can identify with this crowd. That all fades. Like, it fades. What you wear really is irrelevant. So stop trying to, what I wear is my identification. It's irrelevant. Who you really are is what goes on in here. You want to change who you are? Change this. Change the way you think. Change the way you desire. And if you say, well, I don't know what I want, and I don't know what to desire, get to know God by reading His Word every single day, and you'll start to want what God wants. That's how you find out your purpose in life. This the first thing is Joseph trusted God's identity for his life. The second thing is Joseph chose forgiveness and grace instead of bitterness and resentment. Have you ever had anybody do something wrong to you? Maybe they mistreated you, maybe they lied to you, maybe they did something to hurt you, maybe they stole from you, maybe they talked behind your back, maybe they were rude to your face, they said hateful things. You ever had somebody do that? Okay. Thank you, sir. We got two. Okay, now we got some participants. There we go. All right. So when that happens, and every one of us have been really angry at someone for the way they treated us, right? If you're anything like me, my initial reaction is to punch somebody in the face. Like, if you treat me bad, I just want to hit you. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. And I don't, especially if you're a woman. If you're a guy, I think a little longer about it, because I might. But I still don't. I haven't hit anybody in a long time. It's been like 3 weeks. But I still want to. That's my initial reaction. You ever been so mad at somebody and you stayed mad at them for days? Or you stayed mad at them for weeks? Or maybe they did something really bad to you or to your family and you stayed mad at them for months or years. I've got people that have been mad. I didn't even do anything and they're mad at me. And they've been mad at me for years. Then I got people that I've done stuff to and they didn't stay mad at me at all. It's like, I don't know why the people that I didn't do anything wrong, you're still mad at me. And the people that I have wronged, you're not still mad at me. You know why? Because it's a choice. You think Joseph could have been bitter against his dad for laughing at him when he told him what God told him? I would have been. Tell people what I think God's doing in my life and they laugh. Dude, we're not friends anymore. If you're my family, that's the worst thing of all, to do that to somebody. If you tell somebody what you're trying to accomplish in life and they hate you for it, it'd be pretty easy to never talk to those people again, wouldn't it? Somebody does you wrong, says hateful things to you, treats you bad, pretty easy to never talk to that person again, isn't it? Let's tell everybody what they did behind their back, just like they talked behind my back. Yeah, but what they said wasn't true. What I'm saying is true. It doesn't matter. It's still a choice to carry bitterness and resentment. And let's say that I'm really mad at Levi. Okay, let's say that I heard Ty told me that Levi was talking behind my back. Okay? And so now I'm mad at Levi. I'm super angry. And I'm bitter. And I think about it a couple times a week, every week. And it really bothers me. But I'm not going to confront him about it because I don't want to cause drama. And it just is what it is. So I'm just going to forget it. Am I really forgetting it? No. I'm just carrying it. I'm just getting bitter. Is Levi getting hurt by my bitterness? No, correct. You're on it this morning. He's not getting hurt at all. He doesn't even know. And if he does know, he doesn't care because he talks about me behind my back. So clearly he doesn't care about our friendship. Right? So he doesn't care if I'm bitter. At the end of the day, he's still going to sleep. You know who's losing sleep? Me. Because I can't forgive him for what he did to me. Because I can't forgive him and stop being bitter. So now I'm the one carrying this all the time. Imagine if Joseph stayed angry and bitter towards his brothers. How different his story would have ended up, because he ended up on the throne of Egypt. He ended up ruling the entire world. Second in command over the entire world. He was the second to youngest, sold into slavery, thrown into prison, and then put on the throne of Egypt. Now, you've seen the pyramids and all the crazy stuff that they had in ancient Egypt. This was the greatest kingdom in existence at the time. So how can you go from this low place in your life to the throne in your life? How can you go from being a slave in prison to ruling over everybody that put you in prison in the first place? Once he became the king, he could have went and got all his brothers and thrown them in prison. You'll see that later on. He had the chance. He could have killed his brothers, had them executed. He could have went and got Potiphar's wife, who lied about him, and had her head cut off for lying. He could have went and got the butler and the baker. One of them got killed by Pharaoh, but the one that lived, I think the butler. He could have went and got the butler, and he could have killed him for forgetting about him in prison. He could have went and got the prison guards and killed them for mistreating him. But he didn't have any bitterness or resentment, so he didn't need to take revenge. Instead, every day, he recognized, I didn't make this happen in my life. These bad things aren't my fault. So there's not a lot that I can do about it. But even though there are circumstances in my life that I don't like, even though there are people that are mistreating me and misunderstanding me, I'm going to choose to treat them with love and grace and forgiveness. It is a choice. So the first thing we learn from Joseph's life that applies to teenagers as well as adults is that my identity must come from God and not society, not culture, not people. And that includes your own family and your own house. As much as they love you, they're going to tell you that you need to do things a certain way. You need to do things the Bible way. I'm telling you that. And it doesn't mean I'm right and the rest of your family's wrong. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you choose who's right in your life, God or people. And if God is right, then his word is right. Your identity must come from God. And the only way you'll get your identity and purpose is by walking with God, by reading his word. Then you get to know him. then you get to know his will for your life. That's how it works. The second thing is that you have to choose forgiveness and grace over bitterness and resentment. Lastly, I'll give you this, we'll get out of here on time today. The third thing we can learn from Joseph is that we can use the challenges in our life as opportunities for growth and gratitude. Now, you think that those are two different things, growth and gratitude in your life. But they actually go hand in hand. Because you cannot grow in life without being grateful. How many of you have been blessed in your life? God has given you things that you don't deserve, better than you deserve. All of us. And if you didn't raise your hand, you're just not participating on purpose, and that makes you a loser, so don't be a loser. All right? But listen, at the end of the day, we've all been blessed. How many of us right now are in communist China, which the answer is none of us, and if we had a church like this going on, we would risk, even as teenagers, the police and the military coming in, beating everybody in here, and taking everybody to jail. And since you're teenagers, they take you away from your parents, and maybe put your parents in jail because they allowed you to come to church. It is illegal. Maybe we'd be in Ukraine right now, and we can't really have a regular get-together because we might get bombed, or, war might break out in our neighborhood. Maybe we'd be in Afghanistan right now, where if you're a woman and your face is uncovered, they'll beat you half to death in the street in public. Every single one of us have been blessed. Every one of us. And so, just because we have things in our life that we wish we could change, maybe situations with people, maybe people mistreating us or misunderstanding us, I don't expect that every one of you have a great home life. I don't think every one of you have a bad life at home. But I don't imagine that every one of you have two parents that love you at home, with brothers and sisters that care about your well-being at home, with family that really invests in your personal growth and development. Some of you are basically on your own, trying to make it in life as far as your Christian growth on your own. You don't have a big family unit helping you grow as Christians and as young adults. I'm not criticizing the people in your life. I'm just saying some of you don't come from a good support system. And so what you have to do is you really have to have a relationship with God. Because you don't have anybody else that's going to push you to grow. You don't have anybody else that's going to help you to grow. Joseph did not have a good support system. His entire family hated him for no reason. He didn't do anything wrong. His entire family mistreated him. Remember, they sold him into slavery and laughed at him. And then, even after that, you think, well, I'll just get through this, and man, victory's on the other side. God's really going to make me pull through. It was 6 years of this stuff that he had to go through. Slavery, then a servant to one of the rulers of Egypt, then lied about, then beaten and thrown in prison for 4 years. What you have to go through in your life is not that bad compared. I'm not saying it's not bad. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you can use the problems in your life and the challenges in your life to learn how to grow and be stronger. You become a teenager at what age? 13? Now, what's the official age you stop being a teenager? Is it 18 or 19? Because 19 is still teen.
19.
I say 19.
19.
Because by the time you're 25, you're going to be like 19. Trust me, you're still a teenager. I say 19. Now, legally, you can vote, but you can't smoke, and you can smoke, but you can't drink. You shouldn't do either one of those things. You can vote, but don't do the other things. But at the end of the day, society considers you an adult when you're 18. Okay? Some people are adults when they're 16. Some people aren't adults when they're 40 because they're still so immature. So really, there's no specific age. But at 19, teen is still in the word, so you're still a teen. All right? So 20 teen. So you stop being a teen, let's say when you're 20. If you want to say 19, that's fine. But when you're 20, you're no longer a teen. So 13 to 19, how many years is that?
6.
7, actually. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. 7. All right, so 7 years of being a teenager. You become an adult when you're 20. The average person lives, let's say, it's actually over 70 now, the median age, but let's just say 70, Okay, let's say you got some health complications and you don't make it. 7, okay? 50 years as an adult. So how many years as a teenager? 7. How many years as an adult?
50.
You're not going to be remembered for your teenage years. Sorry, hate to break it to you. Unless you're a YouTube influencer that gets 5 million subscribers before you hit 20, you're not going to be remembered for anything you did as a teenager. What you will be remembered for is your adult years when you die. So a wise teenager will start spending a little bit of time every single day now learning how to be an adult. I'm not saying to grow up right now. I'm not saying to act like an adult right now. I'm saying a wise young man or young woman will spend just a little bit of time, maybe 5 minutes a day, learning how to be an adult right now. So that when you're 20, you're not acting like an immature idiot like most 20-year-olds are. Look, I was a very immature idiot. By the time I was 23, I had been arrested multiple times, had 25 grand in credit card debt, like I was a nightmare of an adult. I was terrible in my early 20s, did not have it figured out at all. So I'm not saying I cracked the code. I was the opposite. That's why I know most adults at 20 are dumb as can be. Because at 20, I was dumb as can be, and I was smarter than the rest of them. So that's called pride. All right? But at the end of the day, learn now. Just because you're a teenager doesn't mean you got to be a fool. Just because you're a teenager doesn't mean that you have to hang on to weak, negative emotions. Look, when people do you wrong, forgive them, move on, and look at every negative situation, even family situations, in your life as an opportunity to learn and grow. And how do I do that? How do I learn and grow when everything is negative in my life? I learn how to express gratitude. If you start being grateful for everything, the good things and the bad things in your life, what that will do is open up your perspective and you'll start to see all the good things that are actually happening. If all I focus on is the bad, what am I going to see? The bad. In fact, all right, we'll do this real quick and we'll quit. Everybody look around the room, look at everything green. Take a mental picture of it in your mind. Everything green, 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 everything green that you can find. Take a mental picture of it, everything green. All right, now look forward. Close your eyes. All right, now tell me everything that was white. Okay.
Michael Dover's shirt.
My bag.
Michael Dover's shirt.
All right, stop. Stop.
Bible page.
Now count in your head how many things that are green that you found. Just count in your head.
All the bricks.
All
the bricks. Izzy's shirt.
72. Okay, 10. How many of you had 9? How many of you had 9 or more? Okay, 5. All right, how many of you had 5 or more? Okay. All right, here's what I'm saying. Have your parents, I'll give you a better illustration because that failed. Adults are more narrow focused. Have your parents ever bought a car, and you've never really seen that car that much, and then all of a sudden you see that car everywhere? Okay. Here's what I mean by this. You start seeing it on a regular basis, now you start seeing it everywhere you go. If you want to see things, you have to look for them. But once you start looking for it, you start seeing it everywhere you go. So you might be in a negative situation right now, and you want to see the light, you want to see the goodness, you got to look for it. You got to do the work to look for it. But after you build the habit of looking for it, all of a sudden you start seeing it everywhere you go. And instead of making yourself be grateful and looking for things to be grateful for, you start seeing things to be grateful for every single day. And a person who lives in gratitude, grateful, despite the bad problems in their life, despite the negative situations, despite people mistreating you, even though that's happening, you're still grateful for all of the other good things that are happening in your life, including the negative. What's going to happen is you're going to become a grateful person. And a grateful person is always growing and moving forward. A grateful person is never stagnating, never depressed. You can't be depressed and grateful at the same time. You can't. When you're depressed, stop and breathe for 30 seconds and start thinking of all the things that you're thankful for. It will fix it. Now, sometimes it fixes it for 5 minutes, sometimes it fixes it for a whole day. But a grateful person is not a depressed person. And a grateful person is not an angry person. Sometimes I'm angry in traffic. I forget how people drive in town and country until I come back. Dude, people drive crazy over here. And I get angry in traffic. I do. I get road rage sometimes. And I have to stop and just start thinking of the things that are great today. What's God done for me? And all of a sudden, I'm driving slower than everybody else. And everybody's mad at me because I'm driving slow. Because I've changed my mindset. And you can do it in a second, but you have to do it on purpose. What you look for, you will see. And after you see it enough, you'll start seeing it everywhere you go. All right, so 3 things. Number 1, your identity comes from God. Number 2, choose forgiveness and grace over bitterness and resentment. Number 3, use the challenges in your life as opportunities for growth and gratitude. You can't guarantee to have an easy life. But you can guarantee, this statement, you might not agree with it, but I think I'm right. You can guarantee that you win at life. You can guarantee that you win at life. You're a Christian, dude. You're already saved. You've already won. So on top, just build on that. You can guarantee that you win, but you can't guarantee that it's easy. So when it's not easy, and it's not always going to be, learn these lessons from Joseph instead of just trying to navigate the storm so many people do. All right, let's pray, and we'll be out of here. Father, we love you. We thank you for your word. We thank you for all that you've done in our lives, Lord, that the Bible examples